Hi, I'm Bram.
Hi, I'm Jelle. Bram,
Jelle.
You're a tester.
I'm a tester.
So you might say that you know something about test data.
I do know a little bit about test data, but test data is a very difficult subject. And it's difficult, and it depends on your definition. So not all test data is test data.
Yeah, so you're making it really confusing.
That's on purpose.
Good.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your definition of test data?
Oh, you're making it very confusing for me now. That's even worse. So I would say test data is any data that you use during your automated testing or your manual testing.
Okay, and can you specify if this is your unit testing or your end-to-end testing or your UI testing?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, if I can think about it, but just my gut feeling, no, that it doesn't matter. If I use a lot of data during unit tests, apparently, if that's necessary, then that's test data.
Then I'm glad, because then we have the same definition.
Oh, good.
Which makes it a lot easier, because you see a lot of people, they want to make a distinction between test data you use for your unit testing, because it's generated by your methods and your scaffolding, and the end-to-end testing, that has to do with data that lives in databases, for example.
Yeah.
So that's not generated, that's input by somebody. So people say, no, that's not. Yeah, if we do unit testing, it's not test data. So, but we agree that's all test data, right?
Well, yeah. So, but is there a difference for you? Like besides the use cases, would you say, well, I can understand why people would differentiate?
I can understand why they differentiate, because the one is generated and the other one is input, most of the time by a process or by people.
But the goal of the data is actually the same.
The goal is the same. You need context to prove something. And the test is oftentimes to prove something if it works functionally or technically or non-functionally, if it's the speed is right and stuff. So test data is essential in the end to prove that everything works as intended.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, test data is very, very critical to have, and test data is very, very difficult to create.
Yes. Yes, you can elaborate, but I agree already.
Yeah, I'm going to elaborate because I'm going to tell you something that happened on the other day. We had a catastrophic failure because we pushed the button, all test data was gone. And this is very bad because, and I'm going to explain you why, but we had to do everything by hand, and it took us a whole day with 3 people to recreate all the test data.
I'm interested in why this button existed, but for the purpose of your story, was that test data that you had, was that automatically generated?
No, and that's the problem. That was the problem, at least. So we had a legacy system, as is often the case. We go to help somebody out, and there's a system where we need to replace it. And we had a similar task. There was an invoicing system, and it needed replacing.
Yeah.
So you can imagine legacy system, no more documentation, or at least not that much documentation. So the only way we had to generate the test data was go to the application, input it by hand, and then when everything was said and done, we had our test data.
So just for people maybe not having a concrete image of the test data, can you give an example of the kind of test data we were talking about?
Yes, I can. Imagine a form for a shopping cart, and you need to, in order to order something, you need to leave your address, right?
Yep.
So you put in your name, your street name, the city you live in, all that, and that gets put into a system, and then you get your stuff you ordered. So the test data is actually the data you fill in, put in that form. And this is a straightforward example because it's only, most of the time, it's on one screen.
Yeah.
And that data is mostly contained in the database object or something or other. But if you imagine your attack system, where you have to put in a lot more data to get things done, it gets a bit complex. So test data is all the data you need to be able to execute your task. And for an invoicing system, you need your name, you need the stuff you ordered, all that.
So the history that you're painting is that you had a legacy system where a lot of testers and probably also developers and maybe even some analysts manually created text files or whatever with data that they wanted to input into the system for a test case.
Yeah.
And the amount of test data grew and grew and grew.
Exactly. So
and then you pushed a miraculous destruction button.
So the thing that we needed to do was a user acceptance test. And a user acceptance test is a test where we ask the business, our partners, to test their procedures and their way of work. And we do this after we did our technical tests. So first we do our unit test with data, then we do UI tests and all that. Yep. And then we had to prepare 20 cases for these business users to be able to see if when they pressed the button, the invoice button, they got what they wanted. So what I did was I pressed the button and I didn't distinguish which file I wanted to invoice. So I invoiced them all. So that was, then we had to start over because all our work was done.
Yeah.
So we got we had to do it manually all again. The customer got to test their stuff. Everything was okay. Everything was fine. But then we said, okay, we don't want to do this again.
No.
We want to create something.
I kind of gave away the answer right at the start.
You did.
But you went into looking how to automate the creation and maintenance of your test data.
That's true. So we wanted to be able to recreate our data very fast and very resiliently to avoid mistakes like we did.
Which phase of the development cycle were you going to inject the creation of test data?
Well, that's a good thing because if we could do it all with one solution, it would benefit the whole process, not only the end, but it could even benefit your unit testing. It's a bit difficult, but it could be. So let me ask you this: what would you do in a situation like that? You had a complex system, which with no real access. So what would you do to solve this problem? I'm going to tell you what we did in the end, but
so it's a very broad question, of course.
Sorry.
I think the important part is that you don't want to do any useless work. So I would start with an analysis: which are the priority test cases, which are the critical test cases that we really need to get the process running.
Yep.
And then finally, what kind of test data can we efficiently create, and what are the terrible, difficult, awful things to automate where we can say, okay, let's just do this manually because we can't automate this as quickly. And then hopefully you have a large spread of test coverage quickly and efficiently. Yeah. That's how I would approach it. But of course, the real answer is it depends.
It depends. Well, to paraphrase, you want to do happy flow and some corner cases.
Yes.
So then you can prove the most. You can prove 80% of the functioning of your system with 20% of the effort, right? So the easy flow.
Yes.
Easy flow.
Basically, the high risk, high reward approach.
So I agree on your strategy. That's what we thought of as well.
This feels good. Thank you.
It's good, yeah. I know you dabbled in testing, so I'm not surprised. But then the technical question. Imagine this legacy system that has 5 databases, just random number, with 105 different tables with no documentation, and the tables are this big.
You're really painting a picture of this particular software system.
It's not that bad, but it's a classical monolith.
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing is taking the monolith apart, strangling pattern. In the end, that's what we're in right now. But we needed to create the data. So what we thought of, well, we need to take care of a lot of data technical stuff because we cannot take the production database because of security reasons and privacy reasons. Yeah. So we had these wild ideas. We could analyze the data set and with AI or with tools and recreate it synthetically. And that was very difficult because we needed to analyze this and do that, and we didn't have time. Yeah. And then we thought of, okay, well, if we take this other framework, this other test framework, then we can cut everything apart. And then we could cut the front end from the back end. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't work because we had Blazor server, which does WebSockets,
Yeah.
which then you're lost. You cannot see what's going on, basically. So we couldn't do that either. So we had to recreate the test data. And now I'm going to skip right to the end because we took a shortcut. We discovered that we had the ability to delete the data.
Yeah.
Because of law. After 7 years, we need to, it's financial data, so after 7 years, we need to clean up. And these were stored procedures that we kept up to date. So that was our lifeline.
So you had production code that could actually help you out in a testing scenario.
Exactly. So we took this production code, the SQL, it was a stored procedure. So all these queries, we took them apart, we put them into services, and then we knew that if we did the opposite of deleting, we could create, right?
Yeah.
So that was our lifeline. So we could take one dossier with one ID, we could crawl the whole database, get every relevant piece of data, and copy it to another database.
Right.
That's problem solved. Because you need to create the data once, manually, via your screen, check if everything is right. Better yet, have your business users create the data.
Yes.
And they would call us. This is data we set up. It's good for your regression. And then we would go in, copy it, put it in a safe spot, and then we could reuse it every time.
So how often do your tests run?
Every day, every night.
Every day, every commit, every release?
It depends because, like I said, it's a monolith.
Yeah.
And we are taking it apart. And some systems are written in Razor files, for example, which is kind of hard. And then we have Blazor, which is even harder. But if we split our test stack, so we use C# Playwright for our Blazor stuff, and we use TypeScript Playwright for our Razor stuff, and then we ended up mocking the Razor pages.
Correct,
so, and we could do everything in memory. So we cut that one loose, and that runs in every commit.
Okay, so and then the rest?
And the rest is still in...
nightly build.
It is in a nightly build, the nightly regression test.
Yeah.
And the plan is to expand upon this. So we abandoned the idea that we had to do everything with one framework. We abandoned the idea that we had to have a very technical solution to create our test data. Mm-hmm. If you have something and you can use it in another way, just do it. Just get it done, because you don't have time and money and resources to do everything the best way possible. Just do it good enough.
Yep.
And we learned that we have to be very, very careful with pressing buttons.
Yeah, that's I think an important lesson for everyone involved. So basically what you're saying is with the importance of test data, mm-hmm. You got yourself forced into the situation, but it's as a tester it's always really interesting to look at the life cycle of your test data, because your test data is now again based on semi-actual data, which is I think a good thing.
Yeah.
But then probably some of it also falls under a some kind of we can store this test data for X years max, mm-hmm. and then we need to get rid of it again.
Well, of course, I skipped over some steps. We do anonymize the data that gets put in, because if you're going to ask business users to put in data, they're going to use their own address. They're just going to do that. Yeah. So you need to sanitize that.
Yeah.
If you need to keep your data up to date. A lot of the developers say, well, we don't want to do test data in databases. We want to create a method, and an extension method, and an extension method, and an extension method to generate our data for us.
Yeah.
So we don't have to keep track of the data. Well, maintenance is maintenance. If you're going to do extension methods or data in a database, it's maintenance.
So who now is responsible for the test data? Especially if I understand correctly, you were the button press.
I was the button press guy, so I break everything, because, well, that's what testers do, right? But that's the thing. But I strongly believe in the whole team approach.
Good.
So everybody is responsible, but I also believe that you can have your champions. Somebody can take the lead.
Yeah.
Somebody should take the lead. But everybody's responsible. if you have something about something concerning test data, I think it's only logical that a person with test affinity or something like that takes charge. That doesn't take away your responsibility, because I'm going to ask you if you can please maintain my my test system. Because, well, I don't write code. Well, I do write code, but you're better at writing code, probably. So
you're better at writing test code. It's fair.
Exactly. But if I want some framework stuff to get done.
Shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility.
Everyone has a specialization.
Exactly.
Okay. So is there anything, if you had more time, that you would do differently?
No, not really, because, well, time is relative. There's always a limit on time. So getting things done and getting things done good enough is often the best solution, because then you have time for anything else. So the reason why we do regression testing is to automate all the boring stuff, but also to get the majority tested, and that leaves more time for exploratory testing, for example.
Yeah.
So if I can use a sort procedure, turn it on its head to create test data, that's good enough for the foreseeable future. If we are, as a team, grow and are more mature, and if the need arises for more professional data, more diverse data, then we'll tackle that when we get there. Then we
and I think
then we come knocking.
The basis, like if I speak with a software developer hat on now, that's like the basis that we do as well, the iterative approach where we build an MVP each iteration. Yeah. The same goes for testing. If you start with a fully functional testing framework that can do everything in your first sprint, you've probably gone about it the wrong way. But if your testing framework doesn't improve over the iterations, I think you have a problem as well, because I think testing needs increase and become higher demand. So
I agree, but it should go hand in hand.
Yes.
If you have a system that is not so mature, then you don't need a testing solution with gouden kranen in Dutch. So you don't need to over-engineer your testing solution.
Gouden kranen, that's a golden faucet.
Translates a bit difficult, but it's a golden faucet, but I don't know if the saying goes in English.
I don't think the saying works, but I think you can understand that most faucets don't need to be gold. No,
overly engineered.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting approach from, your role is basically quality assurance. Yeah. And your takeaway message is good enough is good enough.
Good enough is good enough. Do it just in time, just like software. It's not that different. And because test data is very abstract, we had different definitions. Well, we didn't, but most people have different definitions. It applies to software in general. Just get it done, and good enough is good enough.
Well, thanks for this enlightening talk on test data.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening.
I think that's it. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, friend.